This gaming PC cost $175 and is able to play a lot of games at 1080p. This right here is a Dell Optiplex that I upgraded to be able to play a large selection of games that should be fairly easy to replicate. This very specific model is the Dell Optiplex 3040 and it came with an Intel i5-6500, 8GB of DDR3L, and a 500GB hard drive. I did end up replacing the hard drive in with an SSD for better speeds and load times. The SSD that I used is a 1TB T-Force Vulcan Z, and I have used this in many builds before. Now I would have gone with the NVMe drive, but unfortunately for this Dell Optiplex model, it doesn't have M.2 support. I also got an extra 8GB of RAM because these days it's recommended to have at least 16GB, and I also wanted to have dual channel memory instead of just a single stick in the system. And lastly, for the upgrades, I picked a GTX 1650 in my local area. And while there are 1650s that don't require 6-pin power, this one did have a 6-pin power connector, so I picked up a SATA to 6-pin adapter. Now I'm sure it may have been fine without it, as the card only draws 75 watts, which is the same amount of power that motherboards provide through the PCIe slot. Now with these adapters, you can get a slightly better card like the 1650 Super. Using any other card with a higher TDP though, it may be pushing the boundaries of the OEM power supply that does come inside this Optiplex, and it would probably need an upgrade if you were to go with the better graphics card. Now with all that out of the way, let's go over the price that I paid for all these parts, starting with the Optiplex itself. I paid a little less than $60 for the Optiplex. I got it off of eBay and I found it for a pretty good deal, so I snagged it while I could. For the GPU, I spent $60, which I've gotten off of OfferUp in my local area like I said before. For the extra stick of RAM, that was just $12 off of eBay as well. It was pretty easy to find. For the SSD, I paid $35 off of Amazon, and then for the SATA to 6-pin adapter, I paid $10 for a pack of 2. And with all that out of the way, my total came out slightly over at $177 for the build. And as you can see in the video, I did spray paint this Dell Optiplex with a $8 can of white paint. It is an aesthetic choice that I decided not to include in the price for the build, as you can just leave it as is. Now that we got that, let's move on to the benchmarks. So for the benchmarks, I did benchmark 5 games, them being Modern Warfare 2, Rainbow Six Siege, Forza Horizon 5, Halo Infinite, and Counter-Strike 2. I did want to do more games for testing, but I didn't have enough time. And then also in the testing for CS2, I did accidentally have VSync on when doing testing, so that will be noted as well in the benchmarks. So looking at the graph for Modern Warfare 2, I had it at the basic preset with NVIDIA image scaling on at ultra quality, and it averaged around 77 FPS on the in-game benchmark. Moving on to Rainbow Six Siege on ultra using Vulcan, I averaged 145 FPS. Siege is a pretty easy game to run, especially at ultra, so any esports title should be fairly easy to play on the system, like Fortnite, Valorant, Minecraft. Games that aren't really that demanding are going to be very easy to play on the system. With this whole chart, most of these games do require a good amount of power. Moving on to Forza Horizon 5 on the high preset, I averaged around 79 FPS. With Forza, it might also really depend on where you are on the map, as different environments can affect your frame rate in many different ways. The same thing could be said about our next game, Halo Infinite. It was on the low preset, and if I were to do like a small 4v4 match, the frame rates would be pretty consistent. I would have a few dips here and there. Once you get to the big team battle maps, the CPU was fully maxed out at 100%, and the dips in the frame rate were noticeable even with minimum frame rate turned on. Even though the frame rate itself did average pretty well, it was just those 5% lows, those 1% lows that were really noticeable. That was kind of hindering the experience. And moving on to CS2 medium preset, I did have VSync on. I did play on Dust 2, only Dust 2. I'm sure that other maps may affect it differently, but I did stay at a consistent 75 frames per second. So with all the games that I tested, they were all pretty smooth except for Halo. Modern Warfare 2 was very surprising. I was expecting a little bit less performance out of that, With image scaling turned off, it did average around 66, I believe, 66 FPS. I could be wrong. I'll put a note on the screen to correct it if I'm wrong. But other than that, if you wanted to play Valorant, Fortnite, Apex, Minecraft, those games would easily be able to be played on, especially since they're not very demanding. So yeah, for $175, you get a pretty solid experience. You're able to play some AAA titles, a lot of esports titles at a very consistent frame rate across the board, of course, except for Halo. For all the CPU demanding games, I like to use as much of the CPU as possible. The only upgrade path I can see you going is with a Xeon or a i7. That may help with the dips in the frame rate, because I wasn't noticing anything that was very graphically demanding, tanking my FPS, but more so when it was fully loaded on the CPU. And that concludes it for this Dell Optiplex build. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I am looking to do more videos, more builds, hopefully very soon. If you guys want to see things other than me just building computers, let me know down in the comments. I am looking to expand out to just reviewing products or anything else that's related to tech. It doesn't have to be a build. It could just be me talking about something. So with that being said, I'll catch you guys later. Peace.